Angus King, although I have to tell you, I was on a bus from Boston day before yesterday, and the guy was absolutely sure I was Bill Green. I told him I was Angus King, and he persisted. He said, "Come on, tell me what's going to be on the show this week." I just want to try to put this into a little bit of context. And I'm going to, obviously 7 minutes, we're all talking about how constraining 7 minutes is. 87% of the energy used in Maine is based upon fossil fuels. 87% of the energy used in Maine, that's transportation, home heating, and electricity, is based on fossil fuels. Not an ounce of which comes from within Maine. We are entirely dependent upon sources of our basic commodity to sustain life up here on other people, many of whom don't like us very much. I don't think that's very prudent. Wind power is something we have. I stumbled across a speech by Joshua Chamberlain to the Maine legislature in 1867, where he was espousing the radical notion of harnessing the power of our rivers in order to provide energy and jobs to the state. I think we're in exactly the same place. I don't argue that wind power is the whole answer or the majority of the answer. It's part of the answer, and it needs to be situated and put in the right places. The most profound thing for me about the Olympics that we all watched a couple of weeks ago wasn't Bodie Miller or Ono. It was a little ad that appeared 2 or 3 times for a car called the Nissan Leaf. And this car is hitting the market in the next few weeks entirely electric, a plug-in electric car. When we go to electric cars and electric geothermal heat, the demand for electricity in Maine is going to just about double. The question before us is, where will it come from? And you didn't go quite far back enough in my resume, because before conservation, I was in hydropower. And I've got to tell you, I'm old enough to really appreciate the term déjà vu. Because when I worked on hydropower in Maine and New England in the early 80s, I had to go to one hearing in a friend's car because they said if I went, my tires would be slashed in my car. Because people said, "You're ruining our rivers, go build windmills." And today I've been to hearings on wind power where people have actually said, "You're ruining our mountains, go build dams." Well, the point is there's an impact to wherever we get our power. And there are only so many places to get it. There's coal, there's oil, there's natural gas, there's nuclear, there's wind power, and there's solar. That's about it. Conservation is an important part of the mix, of course, but there are limits to conservation. We are ultimately going to need more energy. And the question then is, where does it come from? I got into the wind business because of those that I listed, I felt it was the most benign. I completely agree with Jonathan. These things are big. The first meeting we had with the Roxbury Pond Owners Association almost 3 years ago, the first thing I said was, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. These things are very big. They have to be on the ridges because that's where the wind is, and they are going to change the view. But I felt when you compare changing the view to literally tearing mountains down to the ground in West Virginia for coal, or burning oil or natural gas which puts CO2 up into the atmosphere, I felt that the view was something we could live with in order to meet the energy needs of the 21st century. I've been working on this now for about 3 years. There are all kinds of, you can talk about wildlife and everything. I would urge you to Google wind turbines cows, and you'll see how terrifying wind turbines are to animals. You'll see cows sitting around under wind turbines talking and pulling a bridge and whatever they do. But the real issue is sound. The real issue is sound, and the real issue is distance. If we built a wind turbine right now tonight in Chicago, I think we could all in this room agree it's not going to bother us. If we built a wind turbine across the street where the 7-Eleven used to be, or the Cumberland Farms, I think we could all agree it would be pretty annoying. It's about 100 yards away. Once you agree to that, those two premises, then the question simply becomes, what's the right distance? Somewhere between Chicago and 100 yards. And that's where the science comes in, which can predict. And then you can measure after it's built to see what the actual record is, to tell you how loud it's going to be. And the state has standards that say 45 decibels at night in a quiet zone. You can argue it should be 40. The World Health Organization says it should be 40, but the World Health Organization is 40 averaged over the whole night. The state is 40 for an hour, which is actually more, or 45 for an hour, which is actually more stringent. But the point is, if it's properly situated with an adequate distance from the neighbors, you're not going to have a sound issue. And that is really the way you have to approach these questions. The question before us is, we're going to need more energy. Where is it going to come from? I think it makes sense to have it come from someplace here in Maine where we can control it. Thank you.
Actually, Joanne Moore is next. Oh, okay. All right. No, that's all right. We were going to do Joanne Moore, yes. Alphabetical order.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Joanne Moore. I'm housewife, writer, artist, woodworker, and I love Maine. I'll get right to it.
Stand up. Speak into the mic.
Okay. I'm a member of the Citizens Task Force on Wind Power, Maine, which is a coalition of citizens advocating responsible, science-based, economically, and environmentally sound approaches to Maine's energy policy. However, tonight I speak not for the task force, or even as a member of it. I come here tonight to speak as a citizen who has not been asked or even wanted by my government to speak out on such a crucial matter as wind power as to how it affects Maine's environment and its people. I am told that my voice, indeed anyone's voice, is not wanted. Why else would our governor get a bill LD 2283 passed in 15 days that would impact the whole state, calling it an emergency, while we the people were the emergency, passed with no public scrutiny or input, no hearings, no notification, and that bill resulted in the set-aside of over 2/3 of our state as a special wind energy industrial zone. Within this zone, the usual standards that had traditionally been in place to protect Maine's natural and scenic character were gutted for the benefit of wind power developers. No one asked the people if this land was appropriate for industrial zoning. Not the governor, not the legislator, and not the Natural Resources Council of Maine. Anyone remember the program Land for Maine's Future? Well, it was created in 1987 with a $35 million bond issue, a $50 million bond in 1999, and 2 more bonds in 2005 and 2007 for $27 million, and an additional $5 million for a working waterfront protection pilot program. All in all, these bonds, which I voted for, garnered nearly 500,000 acres of preserved land and 1,100 miles of shoreline were conserved. It improved public access tourism was enhanced, and national heritage, our natural heritage, was protected.